So I'm sampling for my chenille double wide, double weave, double width blanket, and I'm still sampling on my rigid heddle loom at different sets. And I wanted to show you a couple of things about working with samples and working with chenille. So my plan is to use a mercerized cotton yarn for the warp, and here I've got it set up in a stripe pattern, and then a chenille yarn for the weft. And the part of the reason behind that is chenille is wonderfully snugly soft. It feels like velvet when it's woven up. And so it makes a great weft. Sometimes it doesn't make the best warp, and that's largely because chenille does not do well at all in a fringe, and that means hemming. So what I have opted to do, my plan for this double wide throw then is to use the cotton for the warp, because that will make a really nice twisted fringe that can survive a lot of abuse, even washing by hand, etc. Where chenille just just won't. It just categorically does not do well in those settings. So I set up my rigid heddle loom first with, and I'm looking right now for my notes. Here we go. First with a 12 end per inch reed, a 12 dent reed, and I had set it up with my 3-2 cotton being single in the slots and holes, and my 5-2 cotton single in the slots and holes. And I wove my first sample. And this is, again, part of the reason we sample is to test for set, and it's to test for color interaction and all that other stuff. And at 12 ends per inch, I think I felt that the warp was set too close to allow me to really pack in the chenille. One of the other things I have found working with chenille is that it will do something called worming, where basically it just, well, it looks like a little worm going in its interlacement. It will worm if it's not packed really tightly with a really tight beat in the weft. So because the warp ends were spaced too closely together, the chenille didn't have room to really pack it in. Basically the spacing of the weft was impeding it. So I ditched my plan of weaving my friend a throw, or sorry, a wrap, um, on one long continuous warp. I did not do this at the beginning, and I should have. Uh, this is actually how I wove it. Um, I should have woven a small header in cotton, and then done the uh, done the hem stitching, and I didn't do that. So what I had to do was just knot the fringe, cut it off short, knot the fringe, cut it off again. And you can see that I wove chenille, and then I just did a long stretch in cotton, just to see how it would behave at 12 ends per inch. And remember that after I wet finish all these samples, I'm going to mail them to my friend so that she can at least get a sense of the colors. I'm not going to let her decide about the set because she's not a weaver. That's not her skill set. But she will definitely have some thoughts on the colors. So I did hem stitch at the end of this cotton patch of weft. I want to make sure I'm on camera here. Um, I hem stitched at the end of this cotton stretch of weft, and then I just cut it off. And I cut this sample off the warp, and then I put in my 8 dent reed with the same warp and wove a much bigger sample. And you can see this is a really great example of how changing the set changes everything about the cloth. So where this at 12 ends per inch felt a little stiff. And in fact, that's what you want with chenille. When I, years back, wove it with chenille warp as well as weft, it came off the loom stiff as a board, which is what you want, because that's what's going to prevent the worming. It means I had the right set, and I'd pack things in so tightly that it was all going to work. So you wet finish by soaking the fabric when it's got a chenille yarn in it. Then I wrap it in a towel so the towel gets damp, and then you throw it in the dryer for a little while and you check carefully. And then the chenille just softens up and it becomes like butter. The drape on it is incredible. Right now, the drape on this 12 ends per inch is not good, but I won't really know what's going on until I have done the wet finishing. So when I put this at 8 ends per inch, I was packing in at about, I think my notes should say, I should have written this down. It was packing in at about 10 ends per inch. And now this feels so floppy to me that it's too loose. And the chenille is likely to worm. And it's remember, this is cotton yarn, so it's not going to shrink. It's not going to poof up the way other yarns will. And the rayon chenille also not going to poof up the way a wool yarn might. So I feel that this is going to be too flimsy a fabric to work as a throw. But again, won't know till I test. And at least this time I did something right, which is to weave a couple of rows in cotton and hem stitch at each end. So now I'm on my last sample. And this time I've got it set in my 10-dent reed. And I feel that this is going to be the bomb. What I haven't done yet is counted my picks per inch. So let's do that. Oh, and something else I changed. My sections of 5/2 cotton, my skinnier cotton, I double threaded. So they are now closer. They're probably fatter than a 3/2 cotton. Uh, But let's see how many picks per inch I've been achieving. So I just stick my ruler here, and I've actually got seam gauges, and I've got knit gauge things with clear windows. I just don't have any of them in hand right now. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 picks per inch. So that's feeling like, and this is all under tension, so there's no way to tell. I won't know till I get it off the loom how stiff or how floppy it actually is. But this is feeling to me better. But again, chenille has its own rules and its own behavior. And these yarns are just, they are not the same thickness. So trying to get a balanced weave on a yarn with two yarns, warp and weft yarns that are different diameters, gets a little more challenging. And so here you can see that the chenille is actually wider than the cotton, except that, of course, the chenille is twisting and turning around as it's coming off the shuttle because I don't have time for trying to fine tune my wrapping of the shuttle so that everything goes perfectly. That would probably make me insane. But they are different widths or different diameters. So that's a factor. And this is another really good reason for why we sample. So before I close and finish weaving this and then wet finish everything and come back to show you my evaluation of my wet finish samples, I want to show you a little bit about weaving with chenille as weft uh, to give you a clearer sense of where problems might come in when you're not being careful. Sorry, I've got a little bit of yarn overload here. Okay, so I'm using a stick shuttle, which is what I prefer to do on rigid heddle looms because they don't have a shuttle race. Boat shuttles to me are frustrating on my rigid heddle loom unless I'm weaving something so narrow that the boat shuttle will fit right into the shed, go all the way across the shed without any fussing. So I've got my stick shuttle wound with some yarn, and I'm basically, at this point, I'm just going to weave until I get to the end of the shuttle. So we all know that you have to set your weft yarn at an angle, and that will allow the weft yarn enough leeway, as it were, to pack in at its own level without drawing in at your selvages. So I want to show you how important it is, again, when you're weaving with chenille, which has a tendency to worm, to get the right angle. And you only figure that out by experimenting. So if I do a really steep angle because I'm so afraid of drawing, watch what happens when I start to, and I'm going to try and do this in a way that you can see. Watch what happens when I start to beat it back. Okay, you see these loops and bumps and such I'm getting here? That means my angle is too steep. I've let so much slack in that I'm not going to get a straight fell. It's going to have curves and bumps in it. So if I go to about here, and I'm going to call this, I should have brought a protractor, but I did not. I'm going to call this about so my first one was close to a 45-degree angle, and that was too much. That was too steep. Now I'm probably at 30, 35, and let's see what happens when I start to beat. This is pretty good, but I don't know what's going to happen when I get all the way down here. So 30 to 35 is pretty good. Let me try going even shallower, because remember, we don't want drawing, but we do want a firm enough beat, and we don't want those little squigglies in the yarn as it's being beat. So now I'm going at more, I'm going to call this a 15-degree. And again, I'm not getting drawing, and there's no wigglies in my yarn. So that's feeling like I can get away with a 20 to 30 degree angle, 15 to 20 to 15 to 30 degree angle. But you would only know this by practicing. And so one of the things Jane Stafford's been teaching me is that the best way to become a good weaver, to refine your technique, is to put on a warp that you don't care anything about, which is what this is. And just practice. Try different things. Take notes. So I also took the step, as I was weaving each of these samples, of writing down how big, what reed I used, and how wide my weft stripes were, measured under tension, so that when I take these off the loom and get them done with wet finishing, I'll have some sense of shrinkage. To my mind, there's not much point. I mean, I can and I might, of measuring these samples, measuring the height of each stripe, because that's not what I want to do while I'm weaving. I'm always going to be measuring under tension as I weave. So having the measurement under tension is going to help me much more than anything else, because then I can check as I go while I'm making the real thing. I have also made careful notes of the yarn color, so I don't have to rely on my memory or photographs when my friend and I are talking about, okay, I like this square, but not that square kind of thing. So for once, I can actually say, do as I say and do as I do. All this time I'm spending on the sampling and taking notes is going to pay off big time when my friend gets the samples and we have a long FaceTime about this is what works, this is what doesn't work, and then I can move on from there. So sample at different sets. And oh, also by keeping track of these notes, I can I can basically start building my own master set chart, so that I know when I use 3-2 cotton at 12 ends per inch, here's what it's going to turn out to be um, in terms of drawing and shrinkage and all this stuff. So sampling, really important. I'm working on a warp I don't care much about, but I'm taking really good notes. And so this is the perfect opportunity for me to refine my technique, to try out colors, to try out all kinds of different things.